Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Hopkins Hour online seminar, which is titled Clinician Research Capacity Building, Moving from Interest to Engagement. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to all our Hopkins Centre members, partners, and collaborators who are joining us today. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet virtually today. My office is on the land of the Turrbal and Geraghty people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And we encourage all attendees to research and connect with the traditional owners of the land on which they live and work. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Tim Geraghty. I'm Director of the Hopkins Centre and a rehabilitation medicine physician in the Spinal Injuries Unit in the Department of Rehabilitation at PA Hospital. I'm going to, and I'll be the host of today's seminar. I'm going to introduce our speakers shortly, but before that, just a few housekeeping items to address. So we know that internet connections can vary sometimes in these events. So if you have any difficulties, please feel free to put a question in the chat via the toolbar at the top of your screen, and one of our events team will try and help you. If needed, you can leave the Teams event platform at any time and return to it without losing your place. You can turn on captions via the Teams meeting settings and clicking on the three dots on your toolbar, and then selecting language and speech, and then live captions. Please use the chat function today to ask any questions throughout the session. From the top level Teams navigator bar, just select chat. This will open a panel to the right hand side of your screen where you can type your questions or discussion item into the type a message in your type a message box. We will be holding all questions until the panel discussion session at the end, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we possibly can. If we don't get through your question, then we'll ask the speaker to provide an answer after the session. Today's session is about research capacity building for clinicians. You'll hear from three presenters talking about that topic and how to take the idea of a research project to the next stage. Our speakers are Dr Letitia Burridge, who's one of our senior research fellows here at the Hopkins Centre, Emily Allan, who's an occupational therapist with the Spinal Outreach team, and also a current clinical fellow with the Hopkins Centre, and Kristin Tynan, who's a senior clinical pharmacist with the Metro South Pain Rehabilitation Centre, and also a recent clinical fellow with the Hopkins Centre. After the presentations, when we open up the panel, we'll also welcome Dr Teresa Boyle, who's a rehabilitation medicine physician at the Gold Coast University Hospital and chair of the Queensland branch of the AFRM, and Glenn Werner-Wren, who's a physiotherapist and project officer manager who was a clinical fellow a number of years ago. So they'll be joining us on the panel. Just a reminder, put any questions into the chat at any time you like, or save them till the end. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Dr Letitia Burridge, who's going to lead us off with the first presentation. Thanks very much, Letty.
Thanks, Tim, and hello, everyone. I've been asked to give you a glimpse into some of the work that I've been doing to help build clinicians' research skills. Building research capacity has been, for me, like nurturing a plant with three main stems: ad hoc support, formal research projects, and training in research fundamentals. Over the next few minutes, I'll give you an overview of each of these three types of activity. Engaging with rehabilitation clinicians around the hospital campus sends a signal that their research is encouraged, supported and valued. When I press the pause button to greet a clinician in the stairwell, the coffee queue, on the way to the car park or at the lift, etc., we can think aloud for a minute about their research idea, and who knows where that might lead. I've had a lot of these encounters over the past 10 years at Hopkins. Sometimes a clinician will remind me of a long forgotten conversation that acted as a catalyst in their research involvement. And here are some examples of ad hoc research support: patients and families' understanding and expectations of rehab, resilience in rehab nurses, a review of spinal cord injury plastic outcomes, and autonomic dysreflexia, and the rest there. The outcome might not be as tangible as with a grant application or a presentation, but ad hoc research support is less about brilliant outcomes and more about helping clinicians to join the dots between starting, doing, and finishing their research. This builds their research confidence, and it might later help open doors for another Hopkins researcher. Formal research is the well-trodden pathway from a grant application to funding, institutional approvals, then doing and reporting on a research project. Even the most motivated clinicians are often research novices, so it's good for them to learn that the substantial intellectual work of a formal research project is usually a team effort. We want them to finish this research project knowing that they've contributed something valuable to the evidence base for better practice and thinking about ideas for their next one. These are just a few examples of multidisciplinary clinicians' diverse research projects that I've been honoured to be a part of to a lesser or greater extent. Not many clinicians reach the level of leading a formal research project, but when they do, it testifies to their curiosity to ask questions and their tenacity to answer them well. The third stem of building clinicians' research capacity is the most promising in terms of sustainability because A, the training activities can be readily replicated, B, the content is tailored to clinicians' research needs, and C, they use principles of adult learning to optimise the learning experience. The first two of these workshops were conducted in-house and in person. The third series was conducted off campus in hybrid mode to enable regional trainees to participate. All of the workshops were developed on request as ground-up initiatives. And I'll now give you a brief overview of the workshop content, then the self-directed learning modules and online resources. The masterclass model comprises 3 6-hour in-person practical workshops, foundation, advanced, and then in the third workshop, just individual work supported by mentors. And in the months between the workshops, participants progress their research idea. Formal evaluation and feedback suggest that the masterclass was successful and valued. It was last run in 2019, before COVID. The motivation, ideas, resources and mentoring were all there, but the main challenge is the same as for any clinician. Clinical responsibilities take precedence over research. And for most, that means breaking new ground with research in their own time, and it's a tribute to the participants that they did that. This workshop targeted rehabilitation doctors, and it was open to junior medical officers, registrars and senior medical officers. It was a 2-hour one-off workshop conducted in-house and I think just in person. As with the masterclass, participants' evaluations indicated that it was useful and valued, and that one was last run in 2022. Same as with the masterclass, the workshop connected motivated participants with research resources and mentoring. And again, the main challenge is that clinical responsibilities take precedence over research. This is especially an issue for trainees who are research novices and who have to choose a research topic and try to complete that during a rotation. What's great is that they recognise the importance of rehabilitation research and that they're willing to try. This series of 3 interactive workshops was developed for AFRM Queensland and conducted at the RACP Queensland premises. Each workshop ran for 3 hours and they were conducted over a 6-month period in hybrid format. Workshop 3 was conducted late March this year. As with the other workshops, participants' evaluations suggested they found the workshops helpful. All participants can tap into the online research resources that I'll come to in a minute. 2 research capacity building lectures were also developed last year and delivered by Professor Tim as part of the Queensland curriculum. The AFRM workshops are complemented by other AFRM initiatives to strengthen and sustain clinician-led research, including a fledgling special interest group, and we hope a statewide rehab research network, research awards, and potential data collaborations. We're hopeful that the workshop series will continue to be used in the future. Earlier at Hopkins, we had developed 2 sets of self-directed learning modules on practical topics similar to the workshops. And the first is a set of 3 60-minute modules. The second is a set of 12 10-minute modules. Module 1 of the 1-hour series is about turning an idea into a question. Module 2 is about choosing a design and writing a research protocol. And Module 3 is about how to do a scoping review. Complementing each of these hour-long modules is its own batch of supplementary materials. For clinicians who struggle to find an hour at a time, the mini modules are also accessible from this web page, and they cover practical research fundamentals similar to the 1-hour modules. There's also a separate set of folders containing practical how-to resources on planning, doing, and communicating research. The advantage is that these modules and supplementary materials can be used anytime via SharePoint once clinicians have asked for access to them from Hopkins. Challenges and opportunities are often travelling companions, as I'm sure you all know, so what you see here is probably not new. I think for me, the main challenges of being a research capacity builder is to let the clinician set the pace, and this means not ever thinking of a clinician's research project as a cold case. But I will speak up when research novices have grand ideas but lack the insight into the extent of tasks, effort and time it would take to achieve them in one short project. My strategy is just to compliment them on their fantastic idea or question, buddy them through the implications and let them take the lead with their planning decisions. Being close to practice gives clinicians the edge with finding highly relevant research ideas, but being close to research gives academics the edge with how to plan and conduct research. So whether a research-related interaction is ad hoc on a formal research project or at a training event, working with clinicians on their research ideas can help build the evidence base for better rehabilitation practice. Doing research is a journey of many steps and sometimes tight corners where one might ask, why am I doing this to myself? But the journey isn't always about steep challenges. For rehabilitation clinicians, the research destination and the journey are both worth it because the results can help improve the quality of rehab services. The experience helps clinicians to develop their research skills and carry the capacity forward into future research, and it forges research links between clinicians and academics, which can enable further opportunities to conduct research together. It can also give us at Hopkins a sense of achievement and satisfaction when we see clinicians complete their research well and develop professionally through the experience. And it's my pleasure to have been in this kind of role. I'd like to now hand over to Emily Allan for a presentation about her clinical fellowship experience. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Letty. My name's Emily Allan. I'm an occupational therapist with the Spinal outreach team, part of the Queensland Spinal Cord Injuries Service, one of the community arms of QSCIS. Thanks to the Hopkins Centre, I'm currently just about to complete a clinical fellowship investigating the factors influencing ease of use, usefulness and continued utilisation of clinician-facing aggregate healthcare data dashboards, but we refer to it in short as the Rehab Data Dashboard Design Project. Today I'll share a story of how my idea started from a seed and grew into a research project, fellowship and more. I'll share some details of the project findings as well as my reflections on my experience as a clinical fellow of the Hopkins Centre along the way. So my story starts in 2022 when the Quick Start service, a new arm of QSCIS, was launched with temporary funding offering a statewide model of in-reach support. Like with any new service, we were building the plane as we were flying it. Along with colleagues, I was involved in rapidly building a tool to collect and analyse data about patients referred to this new service. I loved seeing how raw data, things like patient types, numbers and locations across the state could be visualised and turned into relevant, meaningful insights for clinical decision making. I could see its potential, monitoring trends, managing workload, quality activities, efficiency and situational awareness. At this point, a research colleague, Delina, who's embedded within my clinical team, suggested two things. One, I could upgrade from the dark ages of Excel spreadsheeting and turn this into a live interactive cloud-based dashboard using Power BI, available to us in Office 365. And two, I could investigate through research what factors actually make a dashboard easy to use and useful for clinicians and what factors sustain engagement and impact data culture. So some reflections at this point on my fellowship. How did I move from interest to engagement? A few of the facilitating conditions I had. First, I had validation from my manager that this was a valuable topic. It aligned with some operational and strategic agendas we had at the time. It was the right time for me personally. I was ready to learn and take on something new. I had the nudge from my colleague to give the application a go. Whilst there was some imposter syndrome about stepping into the research world, I had the encouragement. I also had the practical support from this person, from Delina, to help draft my application. And finally, most importantly, I had support from Tamara and Tim at Hopkins. My application didn't initially progress. However, I was given feedback at a meeting and encouraged to adjust some things and reapply, following which I was successful. So from this idea, the Hopkins Centre Clinical Fellowship afforded me the opportunity to conduct 3 main research activities to inform the build of a prototype clinician-facing dashboard for QSCIS. So the first was benchmarking spinal cord injury clinicians across Australia and New Zealand about their use of data dashboards. Secondly, a scoping review of the literature to specifically look for other cases where aggregate healthcare data dashboards have been used and evaluated. And thirdly, a series of focus groups with QSCIS clinicians to identify what they would like to see and what would be actionable for them in terms of a dashboard, and what might lead them to use one or not use one. So some reflections at this point about the getting started part of the process. It was ambitious. I had a lot to do, but a lot of support from Hopkins. They worked with my manager and I to negotiate the ideal start date to align with the clinical team's priorities and backfill. There was a short delay for me of a few months before I could start, but that was fine within the funding timeframes that they were able to provide. They reassured the department that we could find a way of making this work. I was assisted to set up a clear project plan with deliverables at each stage, keeping in mind at this point that I didn't really know what was involved with each of these steps. I'd not done them before. I didn't have a sense of how long each of them would take. I had never submitted to ethics before or designed a focus group schedule or written a protocol. So I had help from Tamara and set up supervision with Tamara all around that. So I'll share just quickly a few insights from my scoping review. Part of my research, I searched 5 databases for papers describing clinician-facing aggregate healthcare data dashboards. Initially, we had close to 3,000 papers to screen and 216 to read in full, which was a big job, and finally got to 35 papers that met the inclusion criteria, which was really exciting. I'll give you just a quick snapshot of dashboards from 3 of the included papers. This one here was from the UK. Neonatal services allowed clinicians in neonatal services to look at the whole population, trends in interventions and outcomes, and they use this to inform research and quality activities and importantly collaborate across the national network of neonatal services. This one here, also from the UK, visualised qualitative free text patient feedback data for multidisciplinary hospital clinicians. The bubbles show the themes and amount of comments that you can see, positive or negative, in line with a patient experience framework, and delivered that feedback in a timely, live manner to clinicians to action. This dashboard was also from the UK, neurosurgical outpatient service. They used a heat map to analyse trends in referrals by time of day and day of week. This same neurosurgical service used this, what looks complicated, Sankey graph, but you can see from the drop downs that you can...
So for instance, again, with brain tumours, we can see what proportions needed a pending scan or were for advice only, or for instance, were accepted immediately into the hospital.
I hope you got that sound. But you can see that it's interactive, so you can drill down to the patient flow journey that you're interested in. The other thing that was unexpected that I really liked is the way that papers described how they designed the dashboards with the users, and they workshopped with co-design sessions what sorts of visualizations are easy to use and useful for the clinicians. Others use different strategies like personas, like this one had Dr. Skeptic, Dr. Frazzled, and Dr. Eager Implementer, and they ensured that the dashboard would be tailored to each of those personas. So overall, what did I find? I won't read out all of these things, but the factors that impact ease of use of a dashboard for clinicians include things like the visualizations being easy to digest, careful graph choice, use of color, fast, intuitive interaction, having at-a-glance metrics, but clinicians also want detailed patient-level views as well. It needs to have workflow fit, and sometimes clinical redesign is needed, things like that, using automated and routinely collected data so clinicians aren't collecting more data. Some factors that impacted usefulness included it being real-time, accurate, trusted, complete and secure data, relevant metrics, things like comparisons. So no use just telling clinicians there's 500 referrals, but how does this compare to last quarter or last year or services similar to ours? Making it constructive, not punitive, and making it personalised, using filters and bookmarks to make it relevant to the service or to the team. So what are my reflections from this main point of doing? The Griffith Library access was fantastic. Loved having that. Lots of online webinars on demand that stepped me through the steps of a scoping review. Lots of practical tips. I was linked with other Hopkins mentors. So Jessie Mitchell and Camilla Schroeder, thank you. You've been fabulous, helping me with practical ground level things like sorting out my inclusion criteria and dealing with frustrating software from time to time. Just having the dedicated time to really dive into this offline, to work from home or the office, whatever worked for me, and some networking opportunities as well. The list of things that I've learnt over the past 18 months is quite unbelievable. At first, I thought I was just going to learn how to use software to build a dashboard. But doing a scoping review, I have learnt to develop a research question, difference between review types, writing a protocol, what PRISMA guidelines are, how to search databases, which I hadn't done in a long time, using reference management software, review software, so Confidence and EndNote. Just reading academic papers, getting more proficient at that was really good. Doing the focus groups, I'd never done ethics before, as I said, so all of the documentation involved in that. So really moving from not knowing what I don't know to knowing what I don't know, and then actually knowing that I've achieved all of these things, using REDCap, designing questionnaires, consent forms, facilitating a focus group, and then analysing the transcripts with NVivo. Benchmarking, more protocols are involved with those, and generally in my research skills, engaging with others, project management and disseminating results like I am now. So just to wrap up, a little snapshot of the prototype. We're continuing to refine for QSCIS. Some of the features available in Power BI, interactive dashboards. I'm hoping in future, if there's more research opportunities, that I could do another study where I use a dashboard like this with a small clinical team and evaluate our own dashboard in terms of ease of use, usefulness, and what it might be used for. Just showing a few little features there on the screen of the interactive nature of what we can do with maps and filters, to help clinicians with efficiency and situational awareness. So overall, my advice, anyone wanting to consider a clinical fellowship, certainly it's been hard work, it's been challenging, but it's really been worth it. I've loved every minute of it. I would say try to shape your idea, if you've got one, into a research question. Start the conversation with Hopkins. They're very friendly and approachable. Talk to them about the different funding opportunities between seed grants and full fellowships. Take the plunge, dip your toe in the water with research. You won't regret it. You'll learn a lot. And feel free to reach out to me if you want to learn anything more about my experiences. Thank you. Oh, and I'll hand over to Kristin.
Hi, good afternoon. Hopefully you can hear me. So a little bit like Emily's experience, I'm going to share with you my research and experience as a clinician trying to do research. So I'm Kristin. I'm a clinical pharmacist at the Metro South Pain Rehab Centre. And I'm also the recipient of a Bright Sparks Clinician Capacity Building grant with the Hopkins Centre. So I've always loved the idea of research. I think I'm naturally curious and I'm always constantly asking questions, but research really felt quite intimidating and out of reach for me, particularly as a clinician. I really didn't know where to start or how to start. So my project was an audit of referral wait times and their relationship with high-risk medication usage, such as opioids, gabapentinoids and benzodiazepines, which are all commonly used in our chronic pain population. And what was concerning was the rising public concern over opioids and these other high-risk medications and the harm associated with those, and also the recent safety alerts that were also reported by our regulators on the harm of these medicines, particularly around the sedative nature of them, and also just knowing that our patients wait a long time to reach our service here at the Persistent Pain Clinic. And also just doing a quick literature review, we found an Australian study that reported that wait times to pain clinics have been reported up to 2.5 years. So it really just leaves our patients in a sort of a tricky situation. So I wanted to explore whether medication burden increased while they waited. So the Bright Sparks grant was a turning point. It gave me the time, the headspace and support to move from interest to engagement and actually take that plunge. So I learnt lots of things like Emily. I didn't list them all, but she listed a few things there that I went, oh, I forgot about that. So the experience for me was quite transformative. I started with probably limited knowledge. However, I did have some basic understanding. Like most departments in the health system, we do small audits, none of which of mine were published. So the grant helped me learn to translate a clinical question into something more structured research question or something that was a measurable tool that enabled data collection that informed, a clinical decision or understanding a better way we can serve our patients. It helped me have a clear practical methodology from the start. I think is really crucial. I found this the hardest because I found it really hard to predict which data would truly matter. And I find that as clinicians, we often collect sort of too much data, sort of just in case data, which can make analysis harder later. So early input with a statistician would help, or someone who knows statistics quite well. Then that would help align your objectives with a doable analysis plan, which will then help define which necessary data you need. So I felt doing this research has built confidence in me to be asking questions and challenging assumptions. And I also hope to continue this research journey. I did this through the support. I think support's super important from your workplace, from my workplace and my team leader. And academic support was really important. So thank you to the Hopkins team and Tamara to guide me through unfamiliar territory. So I guess research is a team effort, much like health. The other thing is learn how to written manuscript writing for publication. So turning that clinical work into something shareable and translatable into practice. So I'm actually pleased to report that just recently been notified that my project manuscript has been accepted for publication in the Journal of Pharmacy Practice and Research. So my project, I wanted to look at whether patients' high-risk medications increased while they sat on wait lists to come and attend the pain clinic. Due to the reasons why I mentioned before, the safety alerts that had been reported by our regulators, and the literature showing that wait lists can be quite long. So we did a retrospective chart audit of data and information that we routinely already collect, which makes it a lot easier when you're a clinician doing research. We looked at 2 years worth of data, and we had about 500 patients with complete data for analysis. We extracted the data from 2 time points. So the first being the GP referral, which was the start of the wait time, and then their initial EPOC questionnaire, which was a suite of questions that patients need to fill in, and this is submitted close to or at the time of the first appointment. So that depicted the end of the wait time. So we had 500 patients were analysed. Our median wait time to the clinic over this 2-year period was 320 days for the total cohort. And we found 64% were category 3, and they had a slightly longer median wait time of 366 days. The project found that the waitlist duration did not change or predict opioid dose at the first appointment. Total opioid use was 82% of patients referred to our clinic were taking opioids, and only slightly decreased to 78% at their first appointment. Most common opioids we found was the oxycodones, codeine, and tapentadol. We also identified a subgroup of concern. So there was 32% of patients reported a respiratory condition. And having a respiratory condition can increase your risk of respiratory harm and death when taking combinations of these high-risk medications, such as those were highlighted in the safety warnings. And 12% had reported that they were taking all 3 of the opioids, benzodiazepines, and gabapentinoids. So these findings highlighted the need for better early risk identification and triage during their long wait periods. And this data has promoted changes to our triage and early GP engagement, triggering a priority to be seen sooner within their category, and to promote early GP support through our existing GP hotline to flag and support those high-risk patients while they wait. I think these are probably pretty common barriers that most clinicians feel, but it wasn't always smooth sailing. So I guess the time is probably the biggest limiting factor, especially with clinicians with a busy patient clinical load. So I guess the solution there would be having protected time through these fellowships, and having a small manageable project scope. And data analysis for me was quite a barrier. So I felt quite out of my depth with statistics. So support from a statistician or someone who understands statistics and ask for help early on was really, really important. So thank you very, very much to my helper, which was Sam Borg. And imposter syndrome, Emily mentioned that as well. It's nice to hear someone else having that feeling. So I found that having regular mentoring check-ins, which helped normalise that learning curve. So thank you very much to the Hopkins Centre and Tamara for that support. And I guess research, it felt very overwhelming. So breaking it down into chunks and having that that plan and having those action tasks. And also if some of those tasks can be assigned to your rest of your research team, and then having a bit of a timeline and having check-in points where you're reporting on where you're at and where you're going with your research is really important. So not only has this project been invaluable to my own development, it's also importantly contributed to our paying services developing research improvements as well. It's shown how clinical questions, when supported with the right tools, can drive a meaningful change. And I now feel more confident in designing and delivering clinical relevant research. I've become more comfortable working with routinely collected data, so recognising its both potential and its limitations, and using it in ways that are practical and meaningful. For the service, the project has helped strengthen our use of data to inform triage and risk highlighted areas for improvement. And it's opened up important discussions about how we can collect and use our information for further research. I'm hoping it's contributed to a growing culture of inquiry within our team, where we can have small-scale projects, audits, and quality initiatives feel more achievable. So advice to other clinicians, I feel like you don't need to have a PhD to start, which is something I thought in the past. Start small, start with a question within your clinical service. The Bright Sparks grant enabled me to explore that question right from within my service. Ask questions early, lean on your supports, mentors, other researchers, colleagues, and the Bright Sparks program made it all possible, so I encourage you to explore it. And that's all from me.
Great. Thank you very much, Kristin, and all our speakers. And I'll just get all the speakers, as well as Teresa and Glenn, to turn their cameras back on. Great. So thank you to all the speakers. I think that they were fantastic illustrations of the kind of research capacity building that Hopkins does through the clinical fellowships and seed grants and other opportunities. We have got a couple of questions, but I would encourage anyone to put some more questions into the chat now. I'm just going to start by throwing initially to Glenn and Teresa, and just for any initial thoughts or things that really stood out to you from those presentations.
Thanks, Tim. I mean, I'd agree with you. I think they were fantastic projects and presentations, so congratulations to both of you. I think the things that stood out for me that I can definitely resonate from my experience as well was the learning and the degree of learning. And I think you go in thinking, you know, I'm going to learn X, Y, and Z, and you just have no idea how much you are going to learn. And I think both presenters kind of really articulated that. And I think the second thing that came through very strongly for me is the support you get from the Hopkins Centre. And I know Emily talked about it, you know, having that early conversation with them, which I don't think is overly intuitive. I don't think, you know, as a clinician, you're like, I think you think, well, they're probably not going to be that interested. But I think from my experience, and I think from both these presenters, it shows you that they are extremely interested, and they're very supportive. And I think having that early conversation definitely sets you up for success.
Thanks, Glenn. And Teresa, any initial thoughts from you?
Yeah, so just also wanted to pass on my congratulations to Emily and Kristin. Really impressive topics and so relevant. And again, I suppose reiterating the same sentiments that myself and other trainees in rehab medicine have found, where we've been a little bit lost and then had some support. And for you, I think, Kristin, you mentioned being given time, headspace and support, and then being able to build your confidence and start from just a little question and then have the support around you and the knowledge and the expertise to sort of go through that research journey. So yeah, it's exactly what we've tried to implement with the help of Dr. Burridge and Professor Geraghty in the AFRIM project. It's really good to see it play out in real time and see what you've been able to do.
Great, thank you both. And I should have just quickly introduced Glenn, again, who at the beginning I said has had both a clinical fellowship and a seed grant for a project that he worked on a few years ago now, and Teresa Boyle, who's one of the rehab physicians down at the Gold Coast, who's the chair of the Queensland branch and has really been leading the project that we've been helping with at Hopkins, which is about research capacity for the trainees in the rehabilitation medicine training program. So what I might go as a follow-up to a bit of that discussion, there's a question for Emily, but I'm sure that others might like to chime in again about tips for balancing the clinical work with the research load.
For me, it was probably keeping open lines of communication with both supervisors on the clinical and research.
Emily.
Sorry,
Emily,
is that better?
yeah,
yep.
There we are. Yep.
Apologies. Yeah, keeping open lines of communication with both supervisors on the clinical and research side, and being able to be flexible with swapping days if there was appointments for one or the other. But it was challenging. Don't know if anyone else wants to answer that as well.
Kristin, did you have anything to add? You touched on it a bit in your talk.
Yeah, that's right. I think time is the biggest factor, particularly when you have a large patient load as a clinician. So I think if you're going to engage in any sort of research, you really do need some dedicated time put aside, whether it's a day a week or a couple of hours at the end of the day, or just, yeah, something where you can not have that interruption and work on either at wherever you are in your research journey, whether it's at, developing your question or actually just data collection. But yeah, having those open lines of connection, having check-in points with your mentors, having those little goals in, like, not only just that one big goal, but having small goals along the way. So that way you sort of that way your larger goal is manageable.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Kristin. I might go to you, Letty, now. And as people probably heard, Letty's been in the clinician research capacity building portfolio really for about 10 years. And Letty is about to retire, so we're about to lose Letty. But so Letty, during all of that time, what do you think are the one or two most important things that you've learned about what clinicians really need to get started?
It's probably visibility of someone with a bit of research expertise to be able to make that initial connection when a clinician is feeling a bit tentative, and they just need to be able to have that initial chat with someone about a research idea. But access to research mentors when you're really starting to pick up momentum and writing and preparing, that sort of thing, that's important too, and that helps to save time. And just having that arsenal of potential research topics and questions, that someone who's thinking, what can I do? What could I focus on? If they could browse something like that. So those sort of things would be on my wish list.
Great, thanks, Letty. And were there anything in particular with the AFRM project that you learned that was different to the other kind of work that you'd been doing?
Well, speaking as a digital dinosaur, that was my first exposure to having to present in hybrid mode and interact. But I was supported very well by the RACP office staff and by Teresa and everyone. So that aside, it was, I don't know, I think it was just a great experience. Every time I meet clinicians who are eager to do some research, it gives me a buzz. It's really very important.
Right. Okay.
That's the kind
Thanks.
of, yeah.
Thanks, Letty.
You have to,
okay.
excuse me, just one little PS there. You have to be flexible when you're interacting with clinicians, and you have to be opportunistic, blatantly opportunistic sometimes. Yeah. And just encourage them to talk. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. No, thanks very much. That's great. Okay, Emily, there's another question for you, just about any tips on using Power BI for dashboards.
Yeah, the best courses are directly through Microsoft. They're free. There's a dashboard in a day course. Once you've done that, I would have 6 months ago said YouTube, but now I'm saying AI. Ask them how to code and how to do things. It's fantastic.
Okay, great. All right, now I might go back to Glenn. So Glenn, I mentioned before that you had been able to progress your work both through a clinical fellowship and through a seed grant. Have you got any thoughts on, what you felt were the most important aspects of using both those mechanisms to do your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, firstly, I think to be able to do both of them, my thoughts are, it's essential to kind of surround yourself with a good team. Like I just wouldn't have had any idea on kind of where to start unless I had good team members. So I think it's really important, from the beginning to kind of identify, strong members who've got that research experience, and put them in the team, because for me that they were invaluable in trying to be able to be successful in getting both the fellowship and the seed grant. And then the biggest thing was, and it's interesting because it kind of talks to that first question of time, but that was the beauty of them, because it just afforded me the time to have dedicated time. The problem I addressed, it was a problem for decades, and I think people knew it was a problem for decades, but no one really had the time to actually sit down and kind of do the deep dive, and give it the time that it needed to do. So I think that both of them allowed me to do that. And again, it's interesting. Well, I think with both Emily and Kristin's talks, I think they've done great jobs, but they've both identified, there's more to do. And I think, that seed grant allows you then to kind of take that next step and continue kind of building on the good work that you've already started.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. And we're not suggesting for a minute that everyone has to go on and try and get a seed grant on top of their clinical fellowship or anything like that. But it's another mechanism to start to get into the research world. There's a question from Tamara, which I'll pose to Emily and Kristin, but Glenn might have some thoughts as well. Is there anything that you know now that you wished you'd known at the start of your fellowship? Is there anything that we can do better to prepare clinicians for their fellowship? Any thoughts?
That's a tough one. I think you did really well preparing me. I had both researchers within Metro South Health and Hopkins supporting me. Possibly, in hindsight, I could have asked more questions earlier, just not waiting for bigger supervision sessions, but just quick running questions by the wonderful wisdom of the group of collaborators I had around me. Perhaps that would be one thing I could have done better.
Thanks, Emily. Kristin,
Yeah,
anything to add?
I agree with Emily. I think encourage us to ask more questions initially in the first instance. And I think mine was quite opportunistic as well. I knew I liked research, but I didn't actually go looking for how I was going to do it. So I think, I mean, I hadn't even heard of the Bright Sparks Clinician Capacity Building grant until my boss mentioned it to me. So maybe better advertising, which I think is starting to happen now. So since in the last 6 months, I'm actually seeing a lot more of it come through my email. So I think it's definitely getting better.
Great, thanks. And we are sometimes told that we are intimidating to talk to for clinicians, but I just want to reassure you that we are extremely open to being contacted and are very, very happy to talk to you at any stage of your thinking around a research project or the start of a research journey. So please, we're not really intimidating. It always makes me smile slightly, but anyway. Okay, we're coming towards the end. Any last questions? Please, now's your time to put them in. Teresa, I'm going to come back to you for a minute. Just if there were any particular thoughts you had from the point of view of the rehab medicine trainees and the particular work that we've been doing with the Faculty of Rehab Medicine as far as trying to assist the trainees on their journey.
Yeah. So but in case I don't get another opportunity, I just wanted to say a very big thank you to Dr. Burridge and Professor Geraghty, who I worked very closely with over this year. And I think there's a number of the speakers dialed in that came to our workshops and helped us also. So within the rehab training program, the doctors have to do a research project, one of their modules. And I think before this, it had often been approached as quite a tedious requirement, something they left to the last minute, really didn't know how to start and didn't know what to do. And I think through this project, which we've been running now for 12 months, I think it's shifting the mindset to something they can approach more meaningfully, and they've got the support around them, and something which rung true, which you've all been saying already, is a realization that research is a team sport rather than something individual. I think our trainees felt quite isolated, inexperienced before, and then the way we ran these workshops is we had a one-to-one kind of speed dating mentoring section to it, and it gave our trainees an opportunity to meet many of the staff at Hopkins and ask all the silly questions with no one listening. And so it made it accessible for them, and they were able to find the right route in the right direction. And then just finally, as part of this project, we've started this special interest group, and we've had quite a lot of interest from the fellows in Queensland. There was actually quite a bit of research happening, but in isolation. And so hopefully this special interest group can bring interested clinicians together. And, we've now made links with AROC, the Australasian Rehab Outcomes Committee, and hopefully down the track we can sort of build a bit of a research network. Rome wasn't built in a day. Dr. Burridge kept reminding me, but it's a start, and a really positive start. So it's good.
Thanks very much, Teresa. And I meant to say before, when Letty was talking about some of the resources that have been developed and are available, although those resources have often been developed as part of work that's being done specifically for nursing staff or for doctors in some cases. They're very generic resources, and they're applicable to any discipline who wants to start the research journey. So they're available on the Hopkins SharePoint site at the moment, and we are looking at alternatives to house those resources so that they're even more accessible. There's one more question that's just come in about feeling like you've got imposter syndrome. Is there anything during your research that helped allay your fears in that regard?
If I'll go first, I think this was something that I really felt, because I'm a pharmacist. I'm not a researcher. I'm not an academic person. I've never really done it before. So it felt really out of my comfort zone. And I think the biggest thing was the support from the Hopkins Centre. So big thank you to Tamara. I think my check-ins with her were really reassuring. She was absolutely non-judgmental. She was, yeah, Tamara, you're awesome. Thank you very much. It made that imposter syndrome feeling sort of go away, and knew that I was on the right track. And if I wasn't sure, I could always just touch base with Tamara or even Makala at the Hopkins Centre to know where to find that information.
Great. Thanks, Kristin. Okay, we might draw things to a close now with the panel. Thank you to all our speakers, as well as to Teresa and Glenn for fantastic presentations and a very interesting and thoughtful panel discussion. So thank you all very much. Just before people start to sign off, I just also want to let everyone know that the next round of Hopkins seed grants and clinical fellowships funding opportunities will be opening next week, with successful research projects to commence in January 2026. This includes both the short-term 6 months Bright Sparks capacity building grants and the longer term full clinical fellowships. So we encourage you to start thinking about that. These research grants and fellowship schemes are an integral part of what Hopkins does, and our approach to embed models of research that promote continuous positive relationships and interactions between clinicians, researchers, and other end users of our research. We'll be running an information session about the new funding round on Tuesday, the 15th of July at 12:30 to give you more information about the fellowships and the seed grants. And there'll be more information coming around through the usual channels very soon about that session. So if you're interested, we really encourage you to come along to that session. And we'll share the links in the chat there now. So finally, thank you to everyone who's joined in today. We really appreciate the time you've taken to join in with us for another Hopkins Hour. Thanks again to the fantastic speakers and panel members, and thank you to Makala and Rosie and the team who've put on an incredibly well-organised event as usual. We hope you found the session informative and interesting, and most importantly, has pricked your interest in actually undertaking a clinical fellowship or a seed grant. If you'd like to get in touch with any of the presenters from today, we encourage you to do so. And we hope you have a great rest of the week and look forward to seeing you at our next Hopkins Hour, which is also next month in July, and watch out for lots more information about that one as well. Thank you all, and we'll see you later.